So I found this broken phone. Technically, it still works, but the screen is broken, the back is cracked, and it looks like something you'd normally throw away. And with electronics getting so expensive these days, I thought, instead of throwing it away, why not try to turn it into something useful? What if I could turn this thing into an actual Linux PC? I didn't want to just use Samsung DeX. I wanted to see if I could get actual Linux running on this thing and turn it into a proper PC. And somehow, it worked. This is the finished thing. And this isn't just some Linux desktop running for the sake of it. I'm actually running VS Code, LibreOffice, and a bunch of other Linux software on it. And if you like these kinds of experiments, consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing a lot more weird Linux stuff on this channel. So how did I turn a broken phone into this? Let's build it. For this project, I'm using a Samsung Galaxy S8, and there's a reason I'm using this particular phone. The S8 supports USB display output, so I can connect it to a monitor and use the phone as the computer while the monitor acts as the display, which is perfect for this project. For the case, I'm using this cheap Chinese wireless speaker. I picked it because it looks reasonably decent, and more importantly, there's enough empty space inside to fit the phone motherboard and everything else. Now I have two options. I could simply put the phone as it is inside the speaker and call it a day, or I could take the motherboard out of the phone, fit it directly inside the speaker, and add a proper heatsink and fan, just like an actual computer. And obviously, I'm going with the second option. For the heatsink, I'm using this massive piece of aluminum I pulled from an old router. It is completely overkill, which means it's probably perfect. But there's a problem. The CPU is underneath this metal shield, so I can't just put a thermal pad on top of it. I need to remove the shield. And this is where I start getting nervous. Because I'm not an electronics guy, I write software. So there's a very real chance this phone stops being useful right here. Let's find out. I'm using a heat gun to soften the solder holding the shield in place. The idea is simple. Heat the edges, loosen the solder, and carefully lift the shield off. Sounds easy. It wasn't. I gave it some more heat, and eventually, there we go. Shield is off. Underneath, we have the Qualcomm processor and the NAND storage chip. I don't really need to do anything with the storage chip. So now I can finally put a thermal pad directly on top of it and mount my heatsink. But getting the heat out is only half the problem. I still need a way to actually control the phone once it's inside the box. Once this motherboard is inside the speaker, how am I supposed to turn it on? I can't exactly stick my finger through the case every time. Fortunately, the motherboard has two contacts for the power button. Short these two together, and the phone thinks you've pressed the button. So I could install a completely new push button, but that means drilling another hole into the case, mounting the button, and making the whole thing more complicated. And I don't want complicated. So I'm going to reuse the buttons that are already on the speaker, which is actually pretty convenient. I only need one, just the power button. I'm skipping the volume buttons because they can be controlled in software. Also, I'm not confident enough in my soldering skills to start adding extra features for no reason. So let's solder this thing. And yes, my hands are shaking. Soldering is done, so now let's see if I actually managed to connect everything properly. I'm checking the connection with a multimeter, and there's the beep. Perfect. That means the connection is solid. So now we have a power button, which means it's time for the moment of truth. And before I put anything inside the case, I want to make sure the phone still works. But there's one problem. The display is broken, so how am I supposed to see anything? I connected the battery and then connected the motherboard to my laptop. One quick way I can tell if the phone is actually running is by touching the CPU because this thing gets hot. Very hot. And yep, it's heating up. That's a good sign. My laptop also detects the phone, so I thought, why not use screen copy? I should be able to mirror the phone's display directly onto my laptop. Let's try it. And yes, I got the display. Look at that. The phone actually works. And then this thing asks me for a software update. What exactly are you planning to upgrade? Anyway, the phone works, the power button works, and the cooling is ready. So now I can actually put everything inside the case. My plan is to mount the motherboard against the back of the speaker, something like this. Then I need somewhere for the USB connection to come out. Unfortunately, the case doesn't have a convenient opening, so I'm making one, and there we go. The USB adapter fits. Not bad. Now I can glue the motherboard into place, and done. Is it perfectly clean? No. But everything fits, the fan is spinning, the heatsink is sitting where it needs to be, and most importantly, the phone still turns on. So I'm taking that as a win. Let's close the case. And this is what we ended up with. Honestly, I kind of like it. It's not exactly a Mac Mini, but it started as a broken Samsung phone and a cheap wireless speaker, so I'll take it. Now let's actually use it, because building the hardware is one thing. Getting Linux running is the interesting part. The reason this works is because I previously made a script that sets up a Linux environment on Android using Termux and X11. That script started as a little experiment. I put it on GitHub, and somehow it has crossed 3,000 stars, which is still kind of weird to me. And that's what I'm using here. Once Linux is running, I get a proper Linux desktop environment. So now this isn't just Android pretending to be a PC, and I can open a terminal, install Linux packages, run development tools, use spreadsheets, and connect a keyboard and mouse. Basically most things you'd expect from a small Linux computer. And the funny thing is, all of this is still coming from that old S8 sitting inside this box. But now, I know some of you are going to have the same question. Isn't this still Android? And yeah, you're right. Let's talk about that. Android is still the underlying system. What I'm doing here is running a Linux user space and desktop on top of Android, so this isn't replacing Android completely. But that's actually what makes the project interesting. I don't need to replace the entire phone. I just need to turn the hardware I already have into something much more useful. And that's the idea behind the project I'm calling DroidDesk. Which brings us to this logo. You may have noticed this logo on the front. This is actually from another project I'm working on. I'm trying to make Linux on Android feel much more native, including using a desktop environment called Phosh. I've already been testing the setup on phones like the Pixel 6, Galaxy S23, and Poco F1. And the goal is pretty simple. Take a powerful Android phone, connect a monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and instead of having a phone that can kind of act like a computer, make the phone itself become the computer. The next version is going to be much more interesting because I want to get Linux on Android to the point where you could actually use it as your daily desktop. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in next one.